Hi, and welcome back to the Pleasure Tripping channel. My name is Alan Crosby, and today I want to talk to you about those times that things just don't go the way that they should. Maybe your trip was canceled, or there was a delay, or maybe they lost your luggage, or maybe there was an unruly passenger that just kind of spoiled the whole trip for everybody else. Or maybe there was a staff member that just didn't go that extra mile the way you wanted them to. And believe it or not, it also happens on Amtrak. Sometimes things don't go right, and it causes us to want to just sit back and complain. I call that the grumbles. And today, we're going to talk about the top 10 grumbles that people have about traveling on Amtrak. So, all aboard! Yes, we all complain. We all have those situations that come along that try to upset our plans for our vacation. And I've realized that complaining or grumbling about a situation doesn't always make it better. Sometimes it really makes you feel worse, and the people around you start to feel worse. And I don't plan these big expensive vacations and long trips so that I can get upset. I plan them so that I can relax and have fun and enjoy my free time. And the thing that I hate worse about grumbling more than anything else is listening to somebody else grumble. And, that just makes things even more stressful. And the whole time that they're complaining, I was sitting and listening to friends talk about a bad experience they had maybe when they went on their last cruise. And the whole time they're complaining about service or lost luggage or whatever the bad situation was, I'm thinking, but you were on a luxury cruise. How bad could it really be? So, complaining doesn't always improve our situation. And today I want to talk about the Amtrak grumbles, the things that get us upset when we travel by train. Now, before we do that, though, I want you to reach down and click the subscribe button on the screen so that you can make sure you don't miss out on any of our future videos or our events or any of the travels that we have planned. And if you like this video, click the like button, leave a comment, drop us an email, tell us about your grumbles. But we've all heard the stories. We've heard the stories of somebody who went on a great travel experience and it was less than perfect, shall we say. Something happened that tended to spoil or taint the flavor of their whole vacation. Maybe it was a friend that went on their trip, or maybe you heard about somebody going on their very first excursion on Amtrak and one bad thing happened and they're never going to go back again. And I've heard all the grumbles. I've even watched all these videos on YouTube of people who are full-time, lifetime travelers, and they said, we've heard about Amtrak, but we've never been on it, so we're going to go on this trip, and we're going to see how great it is, see if it matches up to all the expectations that people and the things that people say about it. And they have one thing that goes wrong, and they leave a horrible review for the entire trip or the entire experience on Amtrak. And they get the grumbles and they spread those grumbles and they talk about what a horrible experience, and it was an absolute train wreck. Well, no pun intended. But today we want to talk about some of those grumbles. And today we're going to talk about the Amtrak grumbles that are out there by all these, I call them Debbie Downers. Because I'm going to share with you maybe some tools to help you as you get ready to take your trips so that your exciting experience doesn't end up being a grumble session. Because traveling is all about adventure. It's all about excitement. It's not about grumbling. So we're going to talk about the Amtrak grumbles, and we're going to uncover some secrets to help make sure that your trip isn't a train wreck. So to understand why people have bad experiences or their trip is ruined by a single bad event, we need to understand why we grumble. What causes one single event to ruin our entire time, our entire experience? So let's talk about the causes of grumbles. The first thing I think we need to agree on is that, bad experiences are not exclusive to train travel. They happen on every form of travel that you can think of. Anytime you leave the comfort and safety zone of your home, you're going to have the potential of having a bad experience about something. You may get a flat tire along the way, or have an engine breakdown, or get a speeding ticket, and heaven forbid, maybe you might have an accident. But things happen. Even on planes, things happen. They lost your luggage, or, there was a crazy Karen on your flight and you had to make some unscheduled stop in a city you've never heard of. Even on cruise lines, a friend of mine bought, this great luxury cruise, and they were sick the whole time from seasickness. They spent the entire time in their cabin, in their bed, and never enjoyed the event. So things are going to go wrong no matter what form of travel you attempt to take. And the list is endless, and something's going to go wrong. Mark it down, write it down, expect it, anticipate it. So I guess you might say that trains are not exempt from Murphy's Law. So make sure that you're prepared in the eventuality of some of the things that might go wrong along the way. So I guess that leads us to the first real point here, is that the key to any successful trip is your mindset. A positive mental attitude. Just determining before you ever step outside the front door, it doesn't matter if things go wrong, I'm still going to have a good time. I really don't care. You can choose to complain. You can take it out on the conductor, who has no real control over things like delays and things like that. Or you can just roll with the punches. Have the mindset that you're going to have a good, determined before you leave home, you're going to have a good time, no matter what happens along the way. And keep in mind this one thing. You are traveling on a train. One of the biggest complaints that I hear from people about train travel boils down to this. This is not what I expected. Really? So the problem isn't what happened on the train. The problem was their level of expectations. It wasn't the train. It wasn't the food. It wasn't the service. It wasn't even the conductor. The problem lies with our level of expectations. Some of you may remember the football coach years ago, Vince Lombardi, the most famous coach that the Green Bay Packers ever had. And after one terrible defeat in their home stadium in front of their home crowd, they wandered back into the locker room, and after a few minutes the coach came out and he's talking to professional players who've done nothing but played football since they were 10 years old. And these are seasoned players. And he told them, listen, guys, if we're going to get past this, we're going to have to get back to the basics. And he held up a football and he said, this is a football. Now, that sounds really simplistic when you're talking to a bunch of professional football players. But when you think about it, apply that to your next train trip. This is a train. Now, what does that say to you? It says, first of all, what it is not. It is not a plane. It's not going to take you across the country 2,000 miles away in a matter of 4 to 6 hours. It's not a luxury cruise liner. There's no casino. There's no nighttime entertainment. It's not a 5-star hotel. It's not a luxury resort. It is a train. So when you set your level of expectations for your trip, set your expectations on what you might experience on a moving locomotive that travels at a moderate rate of speed across the countryside. Now, It won't take you across the country in a matter of hours. There are no shopping malls on board. There's no casinos on board. And you might be traveling through some areas that are so remote that your cell phone won't even have service. So set your level of expectation according to the environment and plan accordingly. Now let's get into some of the complaints, and these are in no certain order, okay? There's not bad to worse. They're just 1 through 10, okay? So one of the big complaints that I hear from people about train travel is that it's really boring. Well, last year, I went on a trip on Amtrak. I traveled in about 2 weeks' time. I traveled almost 6,000 miles through some of the most beautiful sceneries that Amtrak has to offer, and I was never bored. Yes, there are hours of travel. I spent 5 nights on the train. I traveled the full length of some of Amtrak's longest routes, but I was never bored. This is something that you usually expect to hear from your kids in the summertime, right? I mean, they come up to you and they're like, I'm bored. And you can think of 20 different things they could do to end their spell of boredom. Why don't you go outside and play? No, I don't want to do that. Why don't you play a video game? No, I don't want to do that. Why don't you call up Johnny and see if he wants to play? No, I don't want to do that. You give them all kinds of options, and it doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter what you suggest. They have decided they're going to be bored. So when there are alternatives, they've chosen to be bored. And when someone tells me that they're bored, it tells me they haven't properly prepared for the journey they're going to take. You're not on you're not on a luxury cruise. You're not in a big resort. You're on a train. What does that mean? That means you have a beautiful scenery in a personal screen, live entertainment right outside of your window, watching some of the most beautiful mountain ranges and valleys and farmland around the country that our country has to offer right outside your window. You have, if you're an avid reader, you can take that time to read the book that's been sitting on your nightstand for weeks and you just haven't got around to it. Maybe you can journal your experiences. Some people like to journal. They have to write it down. Or maybe watch a movie that you downloaded before you left home on your laptop. Or you can go to the observation car, to the lounge car, and watch some of those beautiful scenery in windows that go from one end to the other. I've gone through that area, the lounge car, and half of the lounge car is seating that faces out to the windows. You've seen videos and photographs of that. The other half are tables, kind of like dining booths. And I've watched people play cards. I've seen them put together puzzles. I've seen them do work on their laptop or on their tablet. Some people are taking photographs out the window. All kinds of things that you can do. You can take advantage of a time that nothing is expected of you, but just to relax and enjoy the trip. So boredom is a choice, especially when you're on a train. And by the way, you can take that nap you've been telling people you're going to take for a long time. And I know it's going to be a long trip, but plan for it. Expect that there's going to be these long extended periods of time. Prepare yourself. This is your chance to completely unwind. One of the complaints I hear about train travel is about delays. And yes, there are going to be delays. So expect it. Plan for it. I guess, if I recall, around the Christmas holidays, there were a lot of airplane delays, right? Even on cruise lines, they have a storm and they can't get around it. And, they have to skip a port of call, or even cars get stuck in traffic, right? There are going to be issues that cause your trip, for one reason or another, that's out of your control, to be delayed. So preparing for that inevitable delay means there are possibilities that it could interrupt your plans, okay? It means that you need to avoid making tight connections if you have an event to go to or a wedding or something planned. Even people that go on cruise ships these days, they go on the long cruises, they don't show up the day of the cruise, because if they do, there could be a delay in their trip. They could get stuck in traffic, and then they miss out on getting on the cruise ship, and they've just lost thousands of dollars. So you don't make those tight connections. And, there are some times that you need to give yourself permission to just take time, not to avoid being rushed. That's what a vacation is all about. If you have a tight schedule and you can't change that, it's tight, the schedule is very rigid, maybe train travel isn't a good alternative for you. But no matter what form of transportation that you choose to follow, there's a possibility there's going to be a delay. And trains are no different. They have their own unique forms and types of delays, just like planes and cars and cruise lines have their own types of delays. So be prepared for it, expect it, anticipate it, have a workaround plan, foresee what might happen, and plan accordingly. One of the grumbles that I hear a lot, and every time I hear it, I want to laugh out loud. I hear people say, well, this isn't like the last flight that I took. And when I hear somebody say that, I want to say, well, this certainly is not like flying on a plane, because it isn't a plane, it's a train. And every time I hear that response, I want to say, you're absolutely right. It's not like a train. Train travel has its own set of unique regulations and rules and problems and enjoyments. It's kind of like going to a casino, and you're sitting at the craps table, and you lay your money down and you're expecting to win every hand, or you're playing blackjack and you expect to win, and when you lose a big sum of money, you get all upset. And this happened to me. I lost several hands at blackjack, and all of a sudden the pit boss comes over and he says, and I'm upset, and he said, hey, you don't get to win all the time. That's why they call it gambling. If you won all the time, they would call it winning. And he said, you don't hear me getting upset when you win. Good perspective, because train travel is very unique. It's not like any other form of travel. And flying has its own issues. And traveling by car has its own issues. So when you travel by train, expect an experience somewhat similar to what you think you might experience when traveling on a train. And I'm not saying it's worse. I'm not saying it's better. It's simply unique and different. It's like apples and oranges. Flying and traveling on a train is as different as salt is from sugar. Another common complaint that I hear from train travelers is that they complain that their window is dirty. Well, let's analyze this for a moment, okay? You're riding on a train that travels it's in motion for hours, maybe even days without stopping, through thousands of miles without a break. And this is a moving vehicle. Literally hundreds of windows. They travel through rain, they travel through snow, they travel through muddy fields, and they're going to get soiled windows, no matter what you do. And I can't even recall ever seeing a drive-through train wash. Now, they may have them, I just don't know about them. And every now and then you'll see on an extended stop, you'll see the conductors or the staff out there with a squeegeeing. They're squeegeeing off those big windows way up high. And planes are a different story. I mean, they fly all day, and late at night, they finish their last route, and then they go into the hangar and they get all the, mechanical services, and they get a full dressing down, they get a full cleaning inside and out, and they have a full overnight team that does nothing but clean that entire plane. Trains do not have that luxury. They very seldom have the luxury of having a cool, an extended layover. So consider the environment that they travel in. And in fact, I think they're extraordinarily clean compared to what they have to endure. So again, we're talking about setting your level of expectation, okay? Find a workaround. If your window is soiled to the degree you don't think you can look out that window and enjoy the view, go down to the observation car and enjoy those sceneries. They really work at keeping those windows clean. Go down to the cafe car and have a snack. Enjoy some of the tables and the windows that they have there. So there are lots of alternatives, but set your level of expectation for a vehicle that is traveling through all kinds of weather, through all types of environment, snow-covered mountains and desert valleys and muddy fields, and enjoy the trip in spite of the fact that there are a few raindrops dried onto your window. Now, if you're having trouble, you want to take some photography, and the water spots on your window are getting in your way, take a tip from a former professional photographer, okay? The little phones that we have on our camera, and most people are taking photographs with their cell phone, it has an autofocus capability. It means that whatever's right in front of it, that's what it's going to focus on. So if you're sitting in your seat and you're a couple of, about a foot away from the window, trying to take a photograph out the window, what's it going to focus on? The first thing that it sees, and it's the drops of rain on that window. Here's the trick. Put your camera completely against the window, and it's going to look past. It can't focus on that raindrop when it's right there on it. It will focus past that to the scenery on the outside. Maybe that'll help. But there will be spotted windows. One of the other complaints that I hear is that train travel is so slow. Well, if you think about it, passenger train service is synonymous almost to the beginning of our country. Passenger train service started in this country over 200 years ago. And during that time period, that 200 years, think about the things that have changed and grown and in speed of technology in our country. Hey, microwave ovens. Some of us can remember the time before that. I can remember instant replay in sporting events when it was brand new. Space travel. Now we can travel, well, sometimes SpaceX can't, but the rest of the, NASA can still launch rockets and get people into space and at thousands of miles an hour. Private automobile travel, that happened back in the 1930s and 40s. And trains had been in existence for over 100 years by then. Air travel, you can actually get to the other side of the globe in a matter of hours. A lot has changed in those 200 years. And trains have become more efficient, more technologically advanced, and faster and more comfortable in that period of time. But if your expectation is for high-speed travel, then train travel is not the way to get there. Train travel is, you have to set your values, your expectations on the experience, the enjoyment of train travel and the adventure of travel rather than the speed of travel. High-speed trains are available in the United States in a couple of different locations. There's one that goes from Boston down to Washington, D.C. There's another one on the East Coast that goes from Miami all the way up to Orlando. And there's one being constructed in California. There's another one being considered for construction between Dallas, Fort Worth, and Houston, Texas. But Train travel as it exists right now, in my opinion, has been lost to our own impatience. Traveling by train is all about the journey, not just getting from point A to point B. So keep the speed factor in mind when you set your expectations for your next trip on a train. Now, some people try to tell me that train travel is not a good value. But if they tell me that, it tells me that they probably haven't really inspected or investigated that theory or that idea. Granted, it's not the fastest form of transportation to get from point A to point B, but we're not talking about speed. We're talking about value. Let's examine that. Let's take an example. For example, let's say you're traveling from Dallas to Los Angeles, okay? Let's use that example. Now, if you were to take in flight from Dallas to Los Angeles, the average flight going between those two cities, and I investigated this, is about $385 for the average on a major carrier. And that's a coach seat, a place to sit for about 4 hours until you get there. Now, if you purchase a coach seat on Amtrak to get from Dallas to Los Angeles, it would only cost you about $136. That's a lot less. Now, granted, you're not going to get there in 6 hours, okay? But if you take the idea, if you were to take a first class trip on Amtrak, that's riding in a sleeper car, that would increase the price to about $552. That's what most people look up when they look at a sleeper car price and they go, or a bedroom, not just a roomette, but a bedroom, and they're like, wow, it's $1,000. Well, what would it cost you to fly first class on an airplane? That's a first class ticket on Amtrak. And consider the fact that when you buy that first class ticket, you're not just getting a seat, you're getting a private room. And in that private room, you have your own door, you close the door, you pull the curtains, have your own privacy, you have a comfy bed to sleep in at night if you have an overnight trip, you have Michelin-rated chef-prepared meals that are being served to you that can be brought to your room in room service, or you can go to the dining car and experience those, and you even have a private personal attendant for that price. And if you compare that price, that cost, that to, let's say, driving that same distance of almost over 1,500 miles, and count out what it's going to cost you to dine out and to get a hotel room for a couple of nights, the cost of fuel, the wear and tear on your body, and the stress level of driving and so forth. And once again, travel on a train is not about price or even speed. It's about the value of the experience. I mean, you're going to take the trip anyway, right? So why not travel in an all-inclusive, full-service experience on a train? One of the biggest grumbles that I hear, and this is about almost any form of mass transportation, like on a plane or a bus or a train, is about the restrooms. And whether they're too clean or whether they're not clean enough, or whether, maybe they're aged or showing wear and tear. And it's, most of the time we complain of the fact that it's not as nice as our bathroom back home. It's not as spacious. But let's take, for example, the average commercial flight, okay? You're sticking about 300 people inside this little cigar tube, and you give them 6 bathrooms about on an average for all those people to take advantage of and to use on the trip. So now, by comparison, most passenger rail cars will have up to about 6 different restrooms per car. That's about 100 people and 6 restrooms for those, which are a lot like you might find in an airplane. But then in addition to those, or along with that number, those 6 restrooms, there are 2 or 3 specialty restrooms. One is what I call maybe kind of like a family restroom, but it actually it's called a dressing room on the train. And it's the size of a regular restroom. And a regular restroom on a train is about the same size that you would find on an average flight. And then in addition to that regular size restroom, connected to that is a dressing area, has no facility there except for a bench and an area and a space that you can easily dress. It has a hang-up hook so you can hang up your clothes so you can freshen yourself and prepare, continue on your journey if it's a long journey. There's also a lounge restroom. Now the lounge restroom is the entire width of the train. And that lounge restroom has a regular sized restroom that has its own little door. But in addition to that, it has a sofa that stretches across one side of it and a large vanity with a big mirror. So, you can go in there and freshen up. Ladies, you can put on your makeup. You take a little bit more time if you need to lounge or relax or have some special facility that you need for a special purpose. And in addition to that, there's also an handicap accessible restroom that's about 3 times the size of an average restroom on the train. So in addition, in the sleeper cars, if you're in a sleeper compartment, you can have a compartment that has its own restroom / shower right there in the room. There's also a specific shower room in that car that's about double the size of the average restroom that has a full-size shower stall and a dressing area. So in the sleepers, there are a lot more alternatives and flexibility when it comes to restrooms. And I'm going to tell you something. Don't tell anybody I said this, okay? Keep this between you and me. Amtrak would really be ticked off if they found out that I told you. But if you go into the cafe car, in the observation car where down below is the cafe car, at the opposite end from the snack bar area, there is another restroom. And hardly anybody knows about it. And it's out of the way. Very few people know about it, so it's always kept very clean. And you can go down there. You don't have to stand in a line because nobody's there knows it's there. And so you can take advantage of that situation. Shh, don't tell anybody I told you. Okay, now it's my turn. All right? This is my grumble. All right? Connecting segments of a long trip. Now, this is actually one of the areas that I think that Amtrak could make some significant improvements, especially for a lot of the Western routes. Now, you don't see this so much in the East because there are so many frequent trains. There may be 8 or 10 trains a day between Newark and Washington, D.C., for example. But there are times when you're going from one city to the next. Let me give you an example, okay? My son and his family live in Denver. I live in Central Texas. There's no train that goes directly from Central Texas all the way up to Denver, okay? In order to get there, the quickest route is to go to Chicago from Central Texas and then from Chicago to Denver. Problem number 1, the Chicago train, when it arrives in Chicago, mid-afternoon. The train that leaves to go from Chicago to Denver leaves early afternoon. So they miss one another. What does that mean? If you're going on to Denver, you have to get a hotel room, lay over for the night, or sleep in the station, and wait for the next connecting train. So my advice to this is, if you're encountering a situation like this, here's my advice, okay? Expect it. This is not a surprise. This is not something that they're going to spring on you. This is not a last-minute cancellation. It's an established route. Can't do much about that. But remember, we're not driving. We're not flying. We're talking a mode of travel that is all about the experience of journey and experience of adventure. So what do? You can do what I did. The train that goes to Denver doesn't leave till right afternoon. Get up early, freshen up, take your luggage in, check in, drop your luggage off, go explore the city. Use the opportunity for another adventure to explore an area you hadn't maybe planned on exploring, but here's your chance to visit downtown Chicago or another city. So make the most of it. Explore, venture out, discover new places and new sights. Turn your grumble into an adventure. Now, when you travel by train, you are around people. And some of them, unfortunately, just like on planes and cruise ships, they can be loud, they can be obnoxious, they can be inconsiderate. But my personal opinion is that too many travelers these days buy an economy ticket and they expect to be treated like they just purchased the most expensive first class ticket ever. But for the miles that I've traveled by train, I have only encountered one situation that was an inconsiderate traveler. And that was a guy who I went up to the cafe car for a little while, had all my stuff in my seat right next to the window. Nobody was in the other seat. Came back, a guy had gotten on the train and took my seat and had moved all my stuff to the other side. Now, I could have raised, all kinds of ruckus about that. I could have called the conductor and chewed the guy out and made a scene. But I thought, you know what? My next station, where I'm going to get off, is only 30 minutes away. I'm going to let it slide. But on a train, I've encountered more people who were very friendly, that want to share a conversation, not obnoxiously and annoyingly, but just general conversation. Where are you going? Is this your first train trip? What's been your experience in train travel? Enjoy getting to know you as a person. And as a single traveler, very often when you go to the dining car, they will seat you because they're trying to save on space. They only have limited seating. And so they will often seat you with another couple. And one of the dinners that I had, there was a couple from Germany and another gentleman from Scotland. And we had an international conversation over dinner that night. Most passengers on trains are very relaxed, very agreeable. And believe me, you won't find as many Karens as you will in other types of public transportation. One of the final complaints that I hear from passengers or people who have traveled on trains is that, the trains, they shake, they rattle, they roll. There's actually a technical term for this. And you may want to write this down. It's very technical. It's called transportation. You're being transported across the countryside, all over the country, on a rolling rail system that creates movement. Now let's do a comparison. For example, have you ever been in an RV, traveling in an RV, not camped somewhere, but traveling in an RV down the highway, and you want to go to the restroom, and you're trying to have a private moment, and boy, you talk about shake, rattle, and roll, try to have some privacy there. And you're inside, when you're in a train, you're inside a large, high profile, moving object that's moving over uneven terrain, and that's going to create jiggles and bumps and a few little squeaks. Even planes experience turbulence. Cars, they're going to hit a bump or two, or a speed bump even. And if you're traveling cross country for long periods of time, even days, then you might have some issues, especially if you're prone to it, you may have some issues with motion sickness. So you might even spend the night on the train. And I've been very fortunate never to have an issue with motion sickness. I even lived on a boat for 3 years and never had problems with seasickness, even during storms. But if you're prone to that, try to take precautions, prepare for it. Take along that medications that helps you get through that, because transportation produces movement, and movement creates, more movement. And here's the secret to how you can deal with movement on a train. Expect it. anticipate that it's going to happen, plan for it, bring along your medication if you need to, and make sure you balance yourself as you move about the train. There's an old boating axiom that applies here, okay, for boating safety. And it is one hand for the boat, one hand for you, and one hand for the boat, okay? That means if you're walking through the cabin, you're going to carry, and you're carrying something, make sure you use the other hand to steady yourself. And even the conductors will announce this and tell you, if you're walking through, the car, and make sure you reach up, and they tell you to run your hand along the overhead bin compartment, and just have your hand there just in case the train has a bump or a jiggle, and you won't have an accident. One hand for you, one hand for the train. That means that you're going to balance yourself to make sure nothing bad happens along that trip. Well, I hope this has helped you in some way, especially if you're a newcomer to train travel. And I want to encourage you to use these tips to help you prepare for your first trip on a train, or maybe it's your next trip on a train. But remember that train travel isn't perfect, just like any other form of transportation isn't perfect. And but it's a unique form of adventure. It's a unique form to create not just a trip, but a journey of a lifetime when you travel by train. You might encounter dirty windows. You might have a slight delay getting to your destination. You may have demanding passengers or a staff that's not accommodating to you the way you would like. But just remember that trains are not exempt from problems or problem people. Your travel adventure and your enjoyment is all up to you. Make sure that you've made up your mind that no matter what happens along the way, you're going to have a great train experience, not a train wreck. So if you've experienced some grumbles that I haven't encountered here or haven't addressed, send them to me. Tell me about your experiences, but most of all, tell me about your good experiences or how you found a way to work around the negative situations. So all aboard.